First off, notice that it is a dull red heat. It's not a full glow. It doesn't need to be super hot to work this. You're going to work 4 inches. After probably your first pass, it's going to end up around 4.5 inches or more, depending on how aggressively shaped your hammer is.
Can you hit the pause?
See how the first pass grew it a good 1/2 inch or so? Now, on this, I'm replicating what it would take for a customer to use a cross peen. You want them to not overly hit it, just gentle. Just enough to leave some decent impressions. Go up one side, go up the other side. Now I'm going to straighten up the edges. You'll want a somewhat flattish hammer on hand to do this, or even the ball peens will work. Now I'm going over all of the ripples from the cross peen and working them to smooth and flatten out the surface. Look at that, 2 heats and we've grown to 6 inches. That's enough for a small wrist. At this point, I'm going to hot cut it. Now you can hot cut it with a chisel like this, or you can just have the bolt cutters in there and bolt cut it. It's up to you guys. Just be careful to not send a hot piece flying across somewhere. So make sure that it doesn't cut all the way through and that you have to bend it off to break it. I did measure that piece of bar that was remaining. It started at 12 inches and it ended at 8. So that showed that I did actually use 4 inches for that. So now I'm taking and cleaning up the cut end. Pretty easy, doesn't take that much. You're just kind of making sure you even out the thickness and have a nice end piece. What I don't show here is I didn't put the initials in. You guys know how to stamp stuff already. It is at this point that you would put your maker's mark, and you can show them how to do it with the maker's mark, and then they can do the initials with the letter sets and whatever texturing punches you want. Remember that this will grow a little bit longer with the punches. If you put a ton of deep marks in, it will actually grow. After you've done putting the initials and texture in, you're going to forge this around the horn and curl. We'll do one side and then straighten out. Remember that the horn is a cone, so one side is going to be crooked, so it can help to work it from both sides. So you'll take it once you get a curl started on one, and don't worry about it being perfect at this stage. What you're trying to go for is a decent C shape. Wrists are not perfectly circle, so you're not looking for it to be a perfect circle. But try to keep in mind, wherever you forge the curve on the horn on one side, you're going to want to be in a similar spot on the horn as the other side. Now, once you get it forged to that C shape, just heat the whole thing up to a nice glow. Don't melt it, keep an eye on it, quench it. It's now soft. Now you can take this by hand and you're going to fit it to the person's hand. The opening needs to be a little bit tighter than the sideways width of their wrist. So you'll measure that to the person and fit it, and it should be soft enough at this point that you can mostly bend this to shape. If you need a pair of rounding pliers, which all of those that I have are at the Michigan shop, so I have to restock my home. But you can do that, and you can even push it around the horn, little taps if you need to with your hammer. Any tapping you do will slightly harden it up. And it will also take out details, so be very gentle. If you're going to be really gentle, or you're going to use a tiny ass hammer and be incredibly gentle at this point. Now what I'm doing is I'm making sure that if I rounded it out too much into a circle, I'm going to tap those edges back down so it's a good C shape. It's not super hard to do, but you just want to try to get it as evenly distributed as possible, so just keep an eye on it. Testing the fit up. Once it mostly fits through, they can pinch it tight on their wrist, and then it'll kind of conform to shape a little bit better. And there you go. The next step is then taking it and getting it ground. Here we are on a small wheel attachment. You're going to have to use I actually did one of these on one of the Grizzlies while I was there, so it can be done. It's just a lot trickier. You have to use the side of the flat platen and some of the slack to get inside the curve. But I would recommend getting that little buddy up and running and use the small wheel attachment that's there so that you can get the inside radiuses. But you can see how I'm using the slack part of this grinder to curve that. You don't want sharp edges, you don't want sharp corners when people put this on. And then I'm working here on the other side. We'll flip it and you'll see what I'm doing. I'm chamfering the edges of the inside of the cuff so that it is a smooth and comfortable fit for the wearer. And this doesn't really take that long, but it will take a little bit of cleanup in the grind shed when people are done. And that was a 240 or a 220 grit flexible belt that I used. I don't use a 120 on this part. Use something in the 220 to 220 range. And then I'm moving to a buffing wheel. I don't have the grit that you guys have here. I only have a 400 grit belt and then a polishing belt on the other one. So I just used, quick 400 grit, whatever we have on the buffing wheel will work. Remember, it heats up fast. Keep something to dunk it. And now I also be very careful with this. Keep a good grip on it. But you buff the edges as well. This makes sure there aren't any sharp corners. And you just work your way around every single edge, inside edge of this piece. Looks good. Looks nice. Check it from all angles. There you go.